What if I told you that behind one of the biggest boy bands of the 1970s lurked a predator so dangerous that his crimes would make your blood run cold? The Bay City Rollers dominated charts worldwide, but their manager Tam Paton was orchestrating something far more sinister than anyone could imagine. This is the shocking story that the music industry tried to bury for decades. Most people remember the Bay City Rollers as that Scottish band with the tartan outfits who gave us Saturday Night. But what happened behind the scenes makes their story one of the most disturbing in music history. The man who controlled their every move wasn't just stealing their money, he was destroying lives in ways that would only come to light decades later. The story begins in the late 1960s when two brothers, Derek and Alan Longmuir, formed a small band in Edinburgh. They started as the Longmuirs, playing family weddings and covering songs like Wake Up Little Susie. Nobody could have predicted that this humble beginning would lead to international stardom and unimaginable horror. The brothers eventually changed their name to the Saxons, adding singer Nobby Clark and John Devine to their lineup. Their first taste of success came in 1971 with a cover of the Gentry's Keep On Dancing, which reached number 9 in the UK. This breakthrough led to appearances on BBC's Top of the Pops, and suddenly the Bay City Rollers were on the radar of music industry executives, but more importantly, they had caught the attention of a man who would change their lives forever. Enter Thomas Dougal Paton, also known as Tam Paton, a businessman from Prestonpans, Scotland, whose father was a potato merchant. Initially, Paton drove a truck to help the band financially, but he quickly positioned himself as their manager and began molding them into something much bigger. What the public saw was a clean-cut boy band with an innocent image, but Paton was already laying the groundwork for something much darker. Paton was a master manipulator who understood exactly how to market the band to teenage girls. He created the myth that the band members preferred drinking milk to alcohol, cultivating a wholesome boy-next-door image that drove fans wild. Teenage girls across Britain went absolutely crazy for these Scottish lads in their tartan outfits and knee-high socks. The media dubbed it Roller Mania, comparing it to Beatlemania from the previous decade. But behind this carefully crafted image lay a disturbing reality. Les McEwen, the band's lead singer, would later reveal that Paton introduced the band members to drugs from early on. When we got a wee bit tired, he'd give us amphetamines, McEwen recalled years later. He'd keep us awake with speed black bombers. You end up almost showing off to each other what stupid drugs you've taken. The innocent milk-drinking image was a complete fabrication. By 1973, the classic lineup was solidifying, with guitarist Eric Faulkner joining in January, and Les McEwen and guitarist Stuart Wood replacing Clark and Devine by mid-1973. They narrowly missed the UK singles chart with Saturday Night initially, but after a few more attempts, they finally hit the top 10 again in February 1974 with Remember Sha-La-La-La. The success was intoxicating, but it came at a price that none of the band members fully understood at the time. Paton controlled every aspect of their lives, where they went, what they wore, who they spoke to, and increasingly what they did behind closed doors. The band members were young, naive, and completely dependent on their manager for everything. As Roller Mania swept across Britain, the band scored a series of top 10 UK hits that seemed unstoppable. Shang-a-Lang, Summer Love Sensation, All of Me Loves All of You, Bye Bye Baby, a cover of the Four Seasons song, Give a Little Love, Money Honey, Love Me Like I Love You, and I Only Want to Be With You, a cover of the Dusty Springfield hit. Each success tightened Paton's grip on the band. The 1975 UK tour prompted newspaper headlines about the rise of Roller Mania, and the band became the subject of a 20-week UK television series called Shang-a-Lang. Their albums Rollin', Once Upon a Star, Wouldn't You Like It, and Dedication were also top 10 successes, with Rollin' and Once Upon a Star reaching number 1. The money was pouring in, but very little of it was reaching the band members themselves. During this period of massive success, disturbing incidents were already occurring that should have raised red flags. In 1975, Les McEwen killed an elderly neighbor in a car accident due to reckless driving. He was banned from driving for 1 year and fined just £100 Jamaica pounds, a slap on the wrist that many believed was the result of Paton's influence and connections. But the real horror was happening at Paton's home, Little Kellerstane, near Edinburgh. Alan Longmuir would later write in his autobiography about his growing unease with what he witnessed there. I could not help noticing boys drifting around the house, Longmuir recalled. When he asked Paton about it, the manager claimed they were Edinburgh's waifs and strays, and that the police brought them there to keep them out of trouble. Longmuir's suspicions were well-founded. Paton had cultivated relationships with politicians, police officers, and senior members of the judiciary that gave him protection and access to vulnerable children. He had friends in high and low places, Longmuir wrote. The friends in high places included politicians and senior members of the police and judiciary. The friends in low places included scum that would slash your face for a bag of Tam's finest Colombian cocaine. The truth about Tam Paton was finally beginning to emerge. In 1982, Paton was jailed for 3 years after pleading guilty to the sexual abuse of 10 boys over a 3-year period. This conviction should have been a wake-up call for the music industry, but it was largely ignored or covered up. The conviction was just the tip of the iceberg. In 2003, Pat McGlynn, the Bay City Rollers guitarist, accused Paton of attempting to rape him in a hotel room in 1977. The police decided there was insufficient evidence for prosecution, but this wouldn't be the last accusation. In 2009, Les McKeown also accused Paton of raping him, and in 2016, McKeown went public with even more disturbing allegations. The full extent of Paton's crimes wouldn't be revealed until the 2023 documentary Secrets of the Bay City Rollers. This documentary uncovered what presenter Nikki Campbell described as a near inconceivably sadistic and far-reaching network of cruelty that the young men in the band were forced to endure. Paton didn't just sexually and emotionally abuse them, he facilitated their abuse by others. The most shocking testimony came from Gert Magnus, who had lived at a children's home in the 1970s. Magnus revealed that Paton had blackmailed him into procuring other youngsters from care homes so Paton could sexually abuse them. Magnus had lived at Paton's Little Kellerstein home and was told that if he brought other boys to Paton, the manager would stop raping him. Magnus described horrific scenes at Paton's house. There were always parties and lots of young boys and lots of producers going to the room and coming out. Big party. Even more disturbing, Magnus recalled that Jimmy Savile, the notorious BBC presenter later exposed as a prolific child abuser, was present at these gatherings. "I was so young, and I thought that's normal in this business," Magnus said. The documentary also revealed that Nobby Clark, the band's original singer, was told by Paton that the band would get better promotion on BBC Radio 1 if a member slept with DJ Chris Denning, who was later convicted of pedophilia. This revelation showed how Paton used the band's career prospects to coerce them into sexual situations with other predators in the industry. In October 2022, John Wilson was convicted of sexually assaulting children alongside Paton at Paton's home, proving that the abuse wasn't limited to Paton alone, but involved a network of predators. The scope of the abuse was staggering, involving not just the band members, but countless vulnerable children who were brought to Paton's house over the years. While these horrific crimes were being committed, the Bay City Rollers were also being financially exploited. In 2007, former band members filed a lawsuit against Arista Records for unpaid royalties. The legal dispute involved threats from Gordon Clark and complaints by Clark, Mitchell, and McGlynn. In 2013, the U.S. Circuit Court initially ruled against them due to the statute of frauds, but the band's lawsuit against Arista moved forward in 2011 despite challenges with the statute of limitations. The legal battle finally concluded in 2016 with an out-of-court settlement resulting in Sony Music paying £3.5 million, with each member receiving $70,000. For a band that had generated millions in revenue during their peak years, this settlement was insulting. The band members had been systematically robbed of their earnings while simultaneously being abused by the man who was supposed to protect their interests. The financial exploitation was just another layer of Paton's control. By keeping the band members financially dependent on him, he ensured they couldn't escape his influence. They were trapped in a cycle of abuse, drug dependency, and financial manipulation that would haunt them for the rest of their lives. In September 2015, the Bay City Rollers announced a reunion with McKeown, Wood, and Alan Longmuir, but faced challenges when Eric Faulkner couldn't participate due to health issues. They released a single called Boomerang and discussed a new album, but the reunion was short-lived. It ended in July 2016 when Wood stopped booking shows for the reunited lineup, and plans for a 2017 album and tour never materialized. Les McKeown continued touring as Les McKeown's Bay City Rollers, trying to capitalize on the nostalgia market, but the shadow of their past continued to follow them. In 2018, a new generation Bay City Rollers formed performed with Wood, announcing performances in Tokyo, but it felt like a desperate attempt to recapture something that had been irreparably damaged decades earlier. The band members' lives were marked by tragedy and struggle. Alan Longmuir passed away in July 2018, expressing hope for a McEwen-Wood reunion in his autobiography published in 2019. Both McEwen and Wood had denied the possibility of another reunion, but McEwen later expressed willingness to reunite with Wood during the pandemic in August 2020. Ian Mitchell died on September 2020 at the age of 62, and less than a year later, lead singer Les McEwen died on April 20, 2021, at the age of 65. These deaths marked the end of an era, but also highlighted the tragic toll that their experiences had taken on the band members' lives. Meanwhile, Tam Paton had died of a suspected heart attack on April 8, 2009, at his Edinburgh home at the age of 70. At the time of his death, he weighed 25 stone, 350 pounds, a physical manifestation of his excesses, but even his death was shrouded in mystery and criminality. On the night he died, drugs and cash worth £1.5 million were stolen from his house, suggesting that his criminal activities extended far beyond child abuse. The theft raised questions about what other secrets died with Paton. Who had access to his house? What was the source of the £1.5 million in cash and drugs? Were there other victims who never came forward? The answers to these questions may never be known, but they hint at a criminal enterprise that was far more extensive than anyone imagined. The Bay City Rollers story is often dismissed as just another tale of 1970s excess, but it's actually one of the most disturbing examples of systematic abuse in the music industry. Paton didn't just exploit the band financially, he used his position of power to abuse them and facilitate the abuse of countless other vulnerable young people. The band's label as a one-hit wonder in America is particularly tragic when you consider what they endured to achieve even that limited success. Saturday Night may have been their only US #1, but the cost of that success was measured in destroyed lives and decades of trauma. The music industry's failure to protect these young men reflects broader systemic problems that continue to this day. Paton was able to operate with impunity for decades because he had cultivated relationships with powerful people who protected him. The police, politicians, and industry executives who enabled his crimes bear responsibility for the suffering he caused. The 2023 documentary Secrets of the Bay City Rollers finally brought the truth to light, but it came too late for many of the victims. Les McEwen and Ian Mitchell had already died, taking their full stories with them. Alan Longmuir had passed away in 2018, and other victims may never come forward due to shame, fear, or trauma. The surviving members of the band, particularly Stuart Wood and Eric Faulkner, have had to live with the knowledge of what happened to them while watching the world remember their band, primarily for their catchy pop songs and tartan outfits. The disconnect between their public image and private reality is staggering. What makes this story even more disturbing is how common it was in the music industry of the 1970s. Paton's connections to Jimmy Savile and Chris Denning suggest that there was a network of predators operating within the British entertainment industry, using their positions of power to abuse vulnerable young people. The Bay City Rollers were just one target of this network, but their story illustrates how systematic and organized the abuse was. Paton didn't just abuse the band members. He used them as bait to attract other victims and as currency to gain access to other predators' victims. The band's music continues to be played on oldie stations and featured in movies and TV shows, but few people who hear Saturday Night or Bye Bye Baby know the true cost of those songs. Every royalty payment, every licensing deal, every nostalgic reference is built on a foundation of abuse and exploitation. The tragedy of the Bay City Rollers isn't just that they were abused, it's that their abuse was so systematic and so protected that it continued for decades without consequence. Paton died a free man, having served only 3 years in prison for crimes that destroyed multiple lives. The story also highlights the particular vulnerability of young performers in the music industry. The Bay City Rollers were teenagers when they achieved success, making them easy targets for manipulation and abuse. Their dependence on Paton for their careers gave him enormous power over them, power that he used to devastating effect. Today, there are supposedly more protections in place for young performers, but the fundamental power dynamics that enabled Paton's crimes still exist. Managers, producers, and record executives still wield enormous influence over young artists' careers, and the potential for abuse remains high. The Bay City Rollers story serves as a warning about the dark side of the music industry and the price of fame. Their catchy pop songs and innocent image masked a reality of systematic abuse that would haunt them for the rest of their lives. As we remember remember the Bay City Rollers, we should remember not just their music, but also their suffering. They were victims of one of the most systematic and protected abuse networks in entertainment history, and their story deserves to be told in full. The untold fate of their manager, Tam Paton, is now known. He was a predator who used his position to abuse vulnerable young people for decades. But the full extent of his crimes and the network that protected him may never be completely understood. What we do know is that the Bay City Rollers paid a price for their success that no one should ever have to pay. Their story is a reminder that behind the glitter and glamour of the music industry, there are often dark secrets that take decades to come to light. The next time you hear Saturday Night playing somewhere, remember that it's not just a catchy pop song from the 1970s, it's a monument to the suffering of young men who deserve so much better than what they receive.